I like to think that we can't call ourselves green anymore. We just gotta call ourselves that we have common sense.
Yeah.
It's not green. It's, we are at the point where you can't say we're green organizations. No, we are organizations with common sense. And it's common sense shows us that trees can do the job.
Welcome to reVyven, where environmental ideas come to life. At reVyven, we aim to connect, learn, and make a difference.
Cities across the globe are getting hotter. One way to combat the heat is by planting more trees. Baum Dein Baum is a newly formed organization in Switzerland whose core mission it is to plant more trees along public streets in Basel. Learn how the organization started, how they are progressing, and where they plan to go in the future.
Thank you. Sure. Thanks for having us. We're Baum Dein Baum. It's clear that in cities, we need more trees. Cities are searching for cost-effective ways to get more trees into their cities. Actually, cost-effective ways to mitigate climate change in general. And trees are actually a very good way, cost-effective way to do this. However, they face a lot of barriers, from pipes to access to people having anxiety over trees. But there are huge benefits to trees, and I'm just going to talk about that for a second. Going back to the heat wave intensity, there's a fundamental difference between the way that America and other countries cool people, and that's with air conditioning. In Europe, we don't have air conditioning. In fact, in Switzerland, it's banned, but people are finding ways to put a snorkel out their window and cool their own little environment. But this is a really interesting statistic that 89% of US households have air conditioning and only 19% of Europeans do. So we, as Europeans, as living in Europe, have to find ways to mitigate climate change without following the American model of air conditioning, because that is only going to worsen the impact of climate change. Trees are an excellent way to change the city. They lower the summer temperatures by up to 8 degrees in the shade. But upon closer inspection, and these are streets in Basel, this is Gasstrasse on the right and Sperrstrasse on the left, the temperatures can be even greater, from the hot pavement at 42 degrees to under the tree at 25 degrees. Trees also absorb pollution and noise. They reduce stress and are fundamental to the well-being of the citizens. They also increase property values.
So in taking all of these factors into account, we sort of asked ourselves, how can we, in a very straightforward and cost-effective way, bring more trees into Basel? And we recognize the Vorgarten, or the front garden, which is a very prominent typology, urban typology in Basel, as an untapped realm of opportunity for planting more trees in the city. The fantastic thing about the Vorgarten as a realm for planting more trees in the city is that it's you only have to discuss that tree planting with the person who owns the property. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go through the Tiefbauamt, the building department. You don't have to go through the Stadtgärtnerei, the city gardener. It's really just between you and the owner. Taken as a whole, this is Kolmarstrasse in Basel, and this is showing in green all the Vorgartens. The dark ones are ones that we've identified could easily accommodate a tree. But if you take this if you look at Basel as a whole and you take this space as a whole, cumulatively, it really becomes quite a park space. And the impact of this space, if we start to re-envision how we plant the Vorgarten, can really have a huge impact on the city as a whole. So this is an example of a Vorgarten in Rien. And this is really where the idea for Baum Dein Baum exists. The Vorgarten is really that realm where my tree becomes your tree. And hence we came up with this, the title of our variant of our project, Baum Dein Baum, that when you plant a tree in the Vorgarten, it's not just your tree, it's a tree for everybody in the city. It was very important to us that if we wanted to make this project work, that we take away all anxieties or barriers towards planting a tree. So basically our logo is, we're pflanzen Bäume in Vorgarten gratis. We plant trees in the Vorgarten for free. You can have somebody say, well, it's too expensive to plant a tree, we don't want a tree, we can't afford it. Mm-hmm. We're here to say that we're going to do it for you for free. So this was the idea that we had. Very quickly after we had this idea and registered ourselves in the Handelregistramt, a woman journalist from the Beitzé Basel contacted us and say, hey, who are you guys? What are you doing? Can I write an article about you? And we said, yeah, sure, great. So this article came out about the concept for Baum Dein Baum, and then it just sort of went up from there, which we weren't really ready for. But
No.
So we assembled our team pretty quickly, which came to, as we said, we're both landscape architects, which brings a very professional side to the equation. Sarah Ellenberger-Werner, she's from Basel. She's an architect. She works for the city, actually, and she has a great knowledge of the regulations around Vorgartens and how we can move within those regulations. And then Kasper Kerdijk, he's our garden partner. He's lived in Basel forever. He's originally from Holland and has fantastic connections with some of the largest tree nurseries in Europe, which it sounds funny that we don't get our trees from Basel, but that's very standard in the practice. The largest tree nurseries are in Holland and in Germany, and for most big projects, the trees come from there, and the quality of the trees is super high. So we sort of set up our structure quite quickly, who works on what, the activities that we do, how we reach out, and then of course a lot of we have sort of on the bottom level is support from people within our verein.
So I'm going to talk about the trees for a second, because essentially with climate change, the trees are also having to adapt. It's like Melinda talked about the beeches. They're sensitive to heat. So we are looking to plant only trees that will survive in the future. We're not just planting trees for now, we're planting them for the next 30 years, 50 years. So we have there's something called the Galk list, which was published in Germany, and it's a study, a very long and intense study about what trees will work in the city. And this is where we're taking a bunch of our species list from, but we also tap into local varieties as well, so native plants, what will work. But there are many trees in Basel now that are suffering from disease, from insects, from a variety of things. So this is fundamental to our process, that we really have to pick the right tree for the right Vorgarten. And we look at, when we do a Vorgarten assessment, we look at sun, shade, orientation, context of other buildings. We look at pipes. We figure out, what the root system of a tree will be and how it works with the pipes or against them. We also look at walls. These are all fundamental analysis in our process. So we have a meeting with the owners, and we discuss, what would you like in a tree? Would you like something with fall color? Would you like something that blooms? Or do you not want something that blooms? We find a lot of people have allergies. It's really a funny, it's a back and forth process. And then we learn what they are willing to maintain and what they want to look at from an aesthetic point of view. And then we do visualizations. So these are 3 trees actually, and that's the Aisha. And these are visualizations that we send to the homeowners and say, this is what your house will look like with a tree.
In the year that we've been formed, it's been about a year, in the year we've been formed, we've gotten a ton of positive feedback about the simplicity of the idea, and we've established kind of a great network, so stretching from the Gewerbeverband Basel, which is sort of a more car-oriented group, but it's great for us because they have contacts with people who own a lot of property in Basel. We have Baumpflegefirmas, people who will look after our trees in 10 years from now when they need more maintenance. We have support from the city, from Umwelt Basel. This is the tree nursery we work with, and then we have a lot of contact with local groups. Quartiervines. In terms of funding, because we are offering these trees for free for the most part, half of our process is of course looking for money. We have been very lucky that Roche has come on as a sponsor. The first sponsors were Jacques Herzog and Pierre Demeron, which we know that they're very interested in the image of Basel. We went directly to them for money and thought they became sort of a catalyst, hopefully, for other funders. Roche came on board after them. We're in contact with the Basler Kantonalbank, Swiss Los, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a lot of our work. And we've had a lot of success so far.
Yeah.
We've planted, at the end of the year, we will have planted 35 trees. Mm-hmm. These are our trees arriving from Holland, and we plant big trees, as you can see. This was a tree in Neubann, yeah.
This is a single-family home. The owner's there on the left.
A wild apple tree going in. These are various other trees being planted. So the one in the middle was quite funny because the tree was so big and we didn't have a crane, but there was a construction site down the street, and we asked if, hey, could you guys lift this into the garden for us? And they said, yeah, sure, no problem.
They did this on their coffee break.
So it's really, it's a lot of fun, and the moment that tree goes in is really quite special.
But I think also this picture shows we have a diversity of foregardens. The one on the right here is where the homeowners, which is a Genossenschaft, actually broke the asphalt and had another construction company dig the hole for us, and we planted a tree for them. And then in the middle, it's a private house. It is actually Gundeldingerfeld, and we were able to plant 3 trees in front of their Verwaltung, their buildings between the streets.
Here's the sort of process. So this is us talking to the woman who leads up Gundeldingerfeld.
And this is a Colorateria, and this is the actual Colorateria planted in the ground.
Yeah.
This is that same project we highlighted earlier in Furkerstrasse. This is the house without the tree, with the tree, and a happy client. We also are very involved with community outreach. This is the Superblock Fest that took place a month ago, and we had a stand there, and we like to talk to people. We like to talk to them about what we're doing and have them sign up to be a member and just kind of spread the word.
We did one presentation in Rien at the Niederholz Quartier with Laura here, and actually following that, we are now planting 5 trees in the fall on Niederholzstrasse, which is amazing. Just from one presentation, one evening, we get tons of tree requests, and it's great when we can group them together.
Right.
Yeah.
And this was the article that came out after the Superblock Fest, and it was the front page of the Basler Zeitung. Word of mouth, or Mund propaganda, has really, really helped our organization.
We're also slowly getting more involved with students. This was a presentation we did at an elementary school. We are recently approached by a teacher at Kirschgarten Gymnasium, which is at the high school level, where we'll discuss actually running a class or sort of a semester class or a workshop with a group of high school students to see how students can start to get involved in the project.
We see other opportunities in the foregarden as well. This is one of our projects on the left where it's stone garden, which is... You do? So we have kind of told the clients, wouldn't it be nice if you took away your stones and planted, example, a visa underneath, which is great for insects and butterflies. So we are landscape architects. We want to do more. We offer the tree, but we kind of also incentivize them to do a little bit more as well. And we just are in talks with Bauer Baumschule, and they're going to provide a Staudenpackli for sun and for shade. So if you support Mein Baum Dein Baum, you get a tree, then we'll also give you this package of perennials to go underneath your tree.
Moving forward, I think that a lot of what we've done, we haven't done a lot of advertising, and we also, what we would really like to do is get more advertising, and then also as a private verein, we feel like we have the opportunity to make direct contact with property owners. And so moving forward, we would really like to contact owners of Mehrfamilienhaus, multifamily houses, because we feel like planting a tree in front of these not so special buildings really makes an incredible impact. So that's kind of where we see ourselves going next. It's clear in Basel, this was a survey that was done in Basel asking people, are you for more trees in the street area? And 76% said yes. So we really feel like public opinion is behind us. Hopefully with more support and with more money, we can start to do really cool advertising campaigns for this project, where we start to take over plakats along the street side, and then we've sort of also come up with a slogan, 1,000 Bäume for Basel, 1,000 trees for Basel, and this idea, if Basler Kantonalbank can come and sponsor us, they really do a lot of marketing sponsoring, that we could cover a tram with something like that. So, I mean, that's kind of where we see ourselves going.
Yeah, I think the impact of the foregarden in Basel has the potential to be very, very big. And we can see this growing outside of Basel as well as for example, in other Swiss cities. That's our goal.
We had heard about the challenges of heat and shade in urban environments, particularly in Los Angeles, California. Often, people waiting for public transportation have no coverage and no shade, and so a lot of times what they do is either hide behind each other or hide behind a telephone pole. And as cities become hotter, I even noticed this sometimes in Basel, like last week and the week before, which were remarkably warm. I think this is where trees really serve multifaceted purposes. LA's solution to the problem wasn't necessarily a natural solution, and it caused a lot of public outcry when they erected La Sombrita, which are often referred to as metal-shaped surfboards. Do you see trees as the ideal solution?
Yeah, a tree would be ideal, but I think cities also have to, on a fundamental level, start thinking about what's underground, what can support something above ground. And this is what LA is struggling with at the moment. And Basel also struggles with this a lot. The Tiefbauamt does a lot of work. Guys work underground on the pipes, and it's a very powerful organization. And they honestly, it's very expensive to do pipe work, and they don't want.
Well, I would, yeah. Well, I think our goal is to really be as apolitical as possible.
Yes.
So we could stand up here and complain about how the Tiefbauamt is not being innovative about bringing trees into cities or into Basel, but that's precisely why we started this organization, focusing on the Vorgarten and not dealing with as many barriers as maybe the Tiefbauamt is dealing with, or the Tiefbauamt is unwilling to deal with. So, I mean, the thing with trees, and to get back to your question, the trees that we're planting they give a little bit of shade right now, but it'll take 10, 15 years before they're really giving the kind of shade that make a huge impact. But that's okay. That's what you just have to be patient with trees. And they're definitely, the benefits of a large tree are definitely from both in terms of biodiversity, in terms of shade, and just in terms of performance value. The benefits of a large tree are much higher than of a small tree. But we're taking the long view here. And I think that you have to, and I also think that the Vorgarten, even though it is a restrained space, it's not as restrained as planting a tree along, like on the sidewalk. There's a little bit of more playing room for the roots to come out, for water to be absorbed in. So it is our hope, and that's why we're really focusing on these trees that will survive, that are more adapted to a warmer climate. It is our hope that the trees that we plant will withstand the test of time and ultimately perform in an old tree way.
Yeah. And you say you plant mature trees, so they're
no, we
they're not saplings.
They're between 4
larger.
and 5 meters tall. I mean, these are not small trees we're planting. Calipers about 25 centimeters. So these are significant trees with significant root balls, and we want to plant bigger trees because, as Emma said, bigger trees do more for the house and for the street.
But if you've planted, there's studies done that if you plant a tree that's 5 years old versus planting a tree that's 15 years old, 5 years after you plant that tree, the tree will be at this equal height. Because a slightly younger tree, it finds its home faster, it adapts to its environment faster, and therefore will grow at its full potential. So we're trying to find that kind of middle ground of planting a tree that does make some sort of impact when you plant it, but then is young enough that it can find its place and grow in a healthy way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I read through the Basel und seine Bäume that Basel is responsible right now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I was reading this, that they're responsible for caring for 26,000 trees within the city. And I'm wondering, is there an ideal ratio of trees to people within an urban environment that you get the most benefit? I know Singapore does a phenomenal job of trees, but if you didn't have a budget, if we could plant large amount of trees, is there...
I don't think there's a ratio.
Okay.
That is,
or that we could really benefit from. Like, I know you said your goal is to plant 1,000 trees.
Well, there are roughly 1,000 streets in Basel, so this is kind of a nice round number that we gravitated towards.
Yeah. For advertising purposes.
Okay, that sounds good.
But it came from an urban,
but
analysis.
we have a more local goal of 50 trees a year.
Yeah.
The Stadtgärtnerei plants 100 trees a year. And if we can plant 50 a year, then we're happy, I would say.
I mean, 50 years is actually a significant impact.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to understand that when you talk about 50 trees in the city, the performance value is very different than 100 trees in the forest.
Yeah,
like what you were talking about, this almighty tree, because it has a higher performance value because the surroundings are harsher, right? So it's
Absolutely.
doing more.
Yeah. So let's transition to that. What does a tree actually do in an urban environment?
Well, we touched on this in our presentation. It
Yeah.
creates shade, it absorbs pollution and noise from an ecological perspective. From a mental health perspective, it reduces stress. There's even a pheromone in trees that when you walk by them, especially pine trees, give off, and they change something in your brain and relax you. So this is
Yeah, I mean, some of these the headlines of these articles that we had at the beginning, it says trees can reduce the heat-related deaths by a third in the summer.
a lot.
So in terms of that's another reason why we are providing the trees for free, because we feel like if you did a cost-benefit analysis over time, it's a bit of an investment into healthcare in the city. In terms of health benefits, it's immense.
Yeah.
But also aesthetic benefits. I mean,
Absolutely.
for sure.
Well, in terms of cost, and long term, like the maintenance, I mean, there's different options for cooling and things. So if you do the investment in the front end, what's the cost of like maintenance of a tree versus maintenance of another cooling system or something else?
Well, monetarily speaking, each of our trees costs about $2,000 for 2 years. So that's on average roughly $500 a tree plus $1,500 for maintenance, and that is planting the whole.
Maintenance is
It's planting a hole and trimming the tree. We ask all the owners to water their tree for the first 2 years. It's very important. We send them a watering plan. We even give them watering bags to put around the trunk of their tree. I mean, it's really important that they also invest in the maintenance of the tree. But roughly speaking, it's $2,000 to get it in the ground, and then I think I read that increases your house value by something like 8 to 10% in the long term, which is a pretty big number.
I think over the long term, a tree doesn't cost so
No.
much. I mean, of course, the establishment period of a tree or the trees we're planting is about 2 years.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you water it within that 2-year period. But after that, it's easier than a lawn to take care of, because you don't have to do anything after that, really. I mean, of course, 15, 20 years down the road, you do have to look about, trimming dead branches off. But really, it's that first 2 years of watering, and then you're kind of good to go. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, there's an author, Johann Hari, who wrote a book called Lost Connections, and he's alluding to what you just said, and I think that's a really powerful quote. But he says, rates of all forms of mental illness are higher in cities than in rural areas, and people in urban areas with more green space, like parks and trees, they have better mental health than people in urban areas without access to green space. And I know green space is different than a tree, but I think when you walk through an area that's aesthetically pleasing with trees, it makes a huge impact on the overall mental wellness. And this was something we were talking about earlier. We gave a presentation on the education of nature, but the World Health Organization has deemed humans an urban species now, because there are more of us who dwell in urban environments than in rural settings. And I think that even lends itself even more to the project that you're doing, because so many of us are cohabitating in urban environments, but we need that nature connection. So it's really, I think, very, very important.
Well, maybe touching back on the costs a little bit. So, I mean, there's an investment, and I think it's very clear that the benefits outweigh the costs, right?
For sure.
In terms of, let's say, competition on the dollar or the franc, let's say, versus other technologies or other things that you do. I mean, who would be your competitor? Not per se another organization, but in this space, is there even anybody or anything that...
The Basel Stadt has tried to encourage green facades on buildings, and I think that you can even get some money by greening your facade. we would argue, and I don't think incorrectly, that a tree, in terms of cost benefit, is a better way to go than a green facade. And also this notion that when you plant a tree, it's not just helping the house owner, but it's also helping the people who are walking on the sidewalk and the other people who inhabit the street. When you green a facade, it's a bit more directed towards the homeowner. And and I think people have anxiety about kletterflans and climbers on their walls and the destruction that they could do on their walls. So I think if you talk about, shades on the building and all of this stuff, it's just so clear that trees are just the easier way to go and the more cost-effective way to go. I like to think that we can't call ourselves green anymore. We just got to call ourselves that we have common sense.
Yeah.
It's not green. It's, we are at the point where you can't say we're green organizations. No. We are organizations with common sense. And it's common sense shows us that trees can do the job. So why do we have to construct stupid little surfboards all over the place when we should just figure out how to plant a tree? I mean,
Exactly.
It's common sense.
And I think with the infrastructure question, I always say, regardless of the infrastructure you're erecting, wherever it may be, who is responsible for maintaining that, and how do you dispose of it when it no longer serves its purpose? And that's, I think, a huge issue with a tree. The disposal, should it have to be taken down, is more of a natural one than a metal surfboard that is massive, than a cooling system. And I think that's something we need to think about moving forward, is that, like you said, there are a lot of natural solutions that we could be implementing, as opposed to, I like innovation. However, if the innovation has long-term negative consequences, then I don't see it as beneficial. So I think that's really something to look forward to, and I appreciate that you're looking at it from a very natural approach. I think that's really important. Back to the business sector, because it's something I'm really obsessed with in any organization or business. Rob knows I talk about it endlessly, is scaling. And I think there's a real art to scaling. So when you take an organization and you want to grow it, whether it's monetarily or in size or the amount of trees you're planting, I think there's a real art to doing it, and I think most organizations or companies fail in that. And that's my personal opinion, because I think what you lose in that is, it's so nice that you can go to someone and physically talk to them, ask them what their needs are, ask them things such as, do you have allergies? But as Baum Dein Baum continues to secure funding, I'm wondering if, obviously you would like to plant 1,000 trees or perhaps even more. Once you reach that goal, do you see yourself mentoring or consulting other cities within Switzerland? Or do you feel that your project is one in which you could say, okay, we have an area in Spain that would really benefit from them. Here is the model. This is how you implement it. How do you foresee that in the future?
I think we know right now that we have limitations. We're a team of 4. We are constantly filling out grant applications and funding applications. And, ideally we'd like to be monetarily sustainable, but we're in our first year, and it's, we don't know how to scale at this point, in all honesty. Of course, in the future, we see this model of planting in private homeowners' gardens as being spread to other cities. Whether that's our job or it's a model that we hand over, that's okay too. I think any addition in cities for greening, we're not territorial about this business model we've set up.
No, I think we definitely, we've already gotten requests from Basel Land, both from homeowners and from the political side in Basel Land, that they'd really like to bring it to them. And we were at a conference and winter tour last week. So we definitely see expansion, but we don't. We're right now we can pay for the trees, but we haven't figured out a way to pay us yet, and I think that's critical, because it's more work than we thought, and I think streamlining is definitely something we can do, but we need the financial support to kind of find that road.
And it is turning into a full-time job for us. This is really,
it's feasible, but we have to find the
balance?
time and the money to do that.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that Amanda and Emma are both parents, and they're multifaceted in other roles that they play. So this is certainly absorbing a lot of your time, but it's clear that it's a passion project. So the time that you're investing in it is not only something that the city benefits from, but it's something that probably gives you a very...
No, it's so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
We love it. We really love it.
And we have met the gamut of personalities in Basel. I mean, it's really been cool. And I think also just making an impact. Look, we're both expats. We work with 2 people that have
No,
a
I
Basler.
have a Swiss passport.
You do. Yeah, you do. Now, this is new. This is new. I forgot. Anyway, I think it's important that we live here. We have to make an impact. And I also believe that homeowners, you own a piece of property here, you also have to contribute to the city in your own way. And this is, we are trying to
way to do
convince
it, yeah.
people that this is how you do it. And the feedback's been really positive, really positive.
Yeah, and I think it's the simplicity of the idea that brings it forward.
And the comfort of the idea, because they somehow trust us with the the professional background that we bring.
yeah.
That it's that they're not anxious about planting a tree.
That makes sense. Do you have anything else you want to say? And then we'll go into a lightning round. I love this. Where I'm just going to fire questions and then you answer them.
No, I was just going to say or ask, what's your biggest challenge with where you've started and where you want to go?
Well, fundraising has been challenging. We've had to adjust our model a bit. At first, we had this idea that everything about the tree would be free in order to get rid of any anxiety for the homeowner. And now we realize that, for example, responses from companies who we've applied to saying that they actually believe that homeowners should pay a little bit and invest their own money for the tree. And we totally agree. So we've had to adjust our business model along the way. And I think in the future, we're still going to adjust this model. It's not totally solidified.
Yeah, I think with every tree we plant, we learn a little something. We're just trying to be very flexible and find the best path forward.
Exactly.
What feeling comes to mind when you literally put that tree in the earth?
We're 3 girls standing next to Casper, or 3 women, I should say, standing next to Casper. So he's sweating with his team and digging the hole in the ground, and that feels good. That we're not the ones digging the hole.
He calls us the Baumfrauen, we're the tree ladies. But it feels good. I mean, like you said, the power of one. Every tree we put in the ground is like, okay, there's one more that we've done.
And when you pass it, I'm sure you're like,
we pass them all the time because we have checks on them. So we're riding our bike around Basel being like, did you check on this tree? Are they watering their tree? I mean, we are constantly checking up in a very hands-off way. But if we see that a tree hasn't been watered, I've gone into their foregarden and actually watered the tree and then left a note in their mailbox. But
I do think over the long term, and this was the great thing about Niederholzquartier, is that we would like to be able to see an impact on a street, like on a full block level. And when we can plant like what we're doing in the fall, 5 trees or more along one street, that is fantastic. Because for me, as somebody who really like looks at the image of the city, then you really start to see an impact.
Definitely.
And that's another reason why I think we want to have talks with Klimagruppe and various quartiers. And there's one woman from a Klimagruppe who would really like us to target this Genossenschaft that owns a huge stretch of buildings along a very busy road, a ring road in Basel. And if we can contact that Genossenschaft and plant 20 trees in front of that stretch of 5 buildings, and that would be fantastic.
It's like Gundeldingerfeld. We planted 3 along their front of their
felt-
property,
that
and that
was
felt
really
great
fun.
because
3 in a row.
you see it. You drive by and you see them,
Yeah.
and they're getting bigger every month.
Yeah.
So.
And you feel invested. I know when we planted, you're invested. You want them all to grow. There's a real okay, every time you put them in the earth and you're patting the earth down, you're like, please grow, please grow, please grow. And the reality is with us, the project that we work with, they won't all succeed and they won't all thrive. And so you always think, just please grow, because there's such an investment in that. And
we do tell our clients that, there is a chance that it won't work.
Yeah.
This is something we talk about, and if that happens, then we offer to plant a replacement tree.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a different species, or we're flexible in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's such a beautiful investment because you know the time and the benefits that it has for the community. If you had more time, what do you think you would do? If you had more time and an unlimited budget, how do you envision?
I do. I mean, my goal personally is really just to canvas the city, or not necessarily. I don't know if I want to canvas the city, but find students who can canvas the city. Say, okay, this this building, this building, this building, this building can all have a tree, and that we can write letters to all of these owners and present to them our project, because we've really only been able to plant trees now at single family homes, where the owner actually lives there and knows about the project. But I'd really, really love to get to.
Yeah. Well, we had Rixheimerstrasse was the Genossenschaft in
I would
Gunnerdinger.
really like to get to Genossenschaft.
But the majority are single family homes, and we'd like to expand away from that.
Yeah.
If you could recommend one book pertaining to trees, is there one that really stands out that everyone here is now so inspired and connected to trees that they really want to understand it more? Can you recommend a book that we could, or even an article?
We read a lot of lists. Books that really go into what
I read a lot of species books, and
there's this beautiful book, absolutely beautiful book that was republished a few years ago, and it's an Italian book, and it's called The Architecture of Trees.
It's beautiful.
And it is magnificent, and it has, and I forget how you say it in Italian, but it's close to architectura,
Probably, yes.
And it's like this big, but if you really just want to appreciate the beauty of trees, the drawings in this book are
beautiful,
magnificent.
And you see how each tree has a specific shape, a specific branching,
really
and specific
incredible.
leaves. It's very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
I can talk about a book I hate.
Okay, yeah. I want to hear that.
I hate the children's book, The Giving Tree. I hate this book so much. I read it to my kids. I read it as a child, and I don't know if any of you have read this book. It's by Shel Silverstein. It's quite famous in the U.S. and in the U.K. And it's about a tree that gives up everything for the boy. And at the end, it's an old man sitting on a trunk. But the tree is happy. Yeah, bull crap. I'm sorry. It's a very sad book, but presented as a very happy book, and I think this should just be thrown out. So.
Okay, so don't read The Giving
Don't read
Tree,
to your kids.
but
Don't
do
read
read
to
the
your kids.
Italian book. Yes. If you had to leave one impact, which I know is extremely hard to pinpoint, but just for the sake of this question, to leave one gift behind or have an impact in one capacity on the world or even on Basel, what would it be?
One impact. I mean, I personally love riding around and seeing the trees we've planted. Mm-hmm. And it's not about notoriety or we don't have our name anywhere, but it's the best feeling being like, oh, we changed something.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have our name on it, but it's like we feel that we actually did something. We changed it. And that feels really good.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that Basel went through this period in the 50s and 60s where they tore down tons of beautiful single-family homes and built these 1960s, these hideous buildings. And if we can plant trees in front of all these buildings,
Hide
so
them
we
all.
don't have to see them anymore.
Hide them all.
I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love that. It's such a sore spot in, I think, Basel's architectural history that trees can really step in.
The facade greening, the green facades would work on those buildings. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to say? Okay.
Unless anybody has any questions. A comment from the audience. One thing, first of all, I should say I think you're doing a great thing. And one thing that sticks out is that in Basel, a vast majority of housing is multi-residential, and a vast majority of them are rented. So I would imagine that it's going to take an awful lot of liaising to get an agreement to plant a tree in the front garden.
The great thing about Basel, which is how I bought my house, is that there's something called the Grundbuch, where you can look up exactly who owns what property.
Yeah.
And I wrote tons of letters to people asking if they wanted to sell their house, because you can find out who owns the properties. So that's why I'm saying is that you can look at a Mehrfamilien house, look up who owns it, and then we can have direct contact with that person. Whether or not he'll agree to plant it, we don't know. But we're really excited to try that.
But we do have renters coming up to us,
Yes,
for example, at
who have
this
convinced
Super
it's
Block
true.
Fest,
Yeah.
who were really excited about this, and they've now gone and talked to the owners of their building. So it's going to come from within as well.
A little bit from both sides, I think, and I think that's why we're really also playing this angle. A tree increases your property value.
Yeah.
Because probably for a lot of these large building owners, they don't really care about shade or aesthetics. But if they can increase their rents over time because of a tree in the front, then that might be a selling point for them.
Question from the audience. Is it your experience that in better parts of Basel you are planting a lot more trees?
No, actually, I mean, we're so young. We've only been doing this since December, so we find that people who want a tree right now are very open-minded, and they really want to do something. I think it's going to be interesting when we come up to people who we need to convince more to do this, because it's been very easy at the moment to convince people to take a tree.
But their studies show definitely in cities all over the world that higher earning neighborhoods have more tree coverage than lower earning neighborhoods. So it is also our goal to start targeting more, Clybeck and these areas where owners aren't taking it on themselves to plant trees.
A question from the audience. During how many months can you plant a tree? Can you plant the whole year round?
No.
Good question.
It's a very good
We
question.
have a window between our
2 times a year.
Our spring window is, I would say, March, April, and then we'll plant. Our trees are arriving second week of November for our fall planting. So that's the time. You can, but the thing is that the nursery where we're getting the trees are in the ground. So they actually only take the trees out of the ground during those periods. If you buy trees, there's all different technologies of tree nurseries. There's something called air pots.
Air root pots.
Air root pots, where the trees are actually in a pot. And those trees you can plant pretty much any time of the year. But yeah, we're kind of sticking within that.
A question from the audience. So you've planted like 35 trees in 4 months?
We will have planted...
at the end of the year.
Cumulatively in 2 planting seasons, 35.
We planted 10 in the spring, and we have 25 on the list now. So, it grew.
Well, I just want to thank you for the work you're doing for, first of all, sharing your Saturday with us and your expertise, but also because I think the project is very tangible for the city of Basel, and it's certainly something we can all benefit from. And I think it also opens a whole different realm for people who are not necessarily schooled in landscape architecture, but also the world of trees, to really understand how multifaceted they are, and they serve so many purposes. And so it's a really beautiful addition to the Basel landscape. And then before I let you go, I just discovered this project. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's through the University of Basel, and it's located in Holstein, so in Basel-Land, which is not far from Liestal, but it's called the Swiss Canopy Crane 2 Experiment. This is fascinating, and it was picked up by National Geographic, and I'm sharing it because I think it's open, you can see it, but it's a 20-year project. And what they're doing is they now have access with this crane to really look at the over 250 trees to see how the current climate is impacting mature trees. And they have over 12 species of trees that they're studying, and it's something I would like to visit, because if you just search it, I have the website if you want it, but it looks like a University of Basel project, but it really looks at the temperatures that trees, if they can resist drought, the temperatures, it looks at all different aspects. So I think it's kind of a cool local project that if people are interested in looking more, it's run through the university. So
I mean, I think there's something really important about that, but we are, if you look, not a doomsday perspective, but we are going to lose a lot of mature trees in the city and in the woods, and the beech forest, for example, because of the changing climate. And it's why we are so focused on future trees, and we have a lot of clients that want native fruit trees, and we're like, no, and we try to steer them in another direction. So, but there's no doubt that
absolutely, this is the work
it's going to evolve, and trees have a lifespan as well.
It's what Almighty Tree is really trying to combat with their foresting, their reforesting, because they're losing so many trees. And I mean, for us, it's really sad. When we contacted the local Gemeinde in Mutens, I was like, God, they're taking forever to fix this trail. Like there's a little wood plank out, and then they wrote back and said, no, it's no longer safe for individuals to hike there. And it was such, I know you know it.
I know it,
It's such a beautiful location. And Robert and I were even working with an organization to have a Fresh Air Kids Trail there. It was a really special place. And we just visited it last weekend to take photos and images. And you really can see it. And it's so close to home. So for us, it's even more of an impact. But the future.
But I think it's really important to stay focused on the positive, too.
Absolutely.
We can, as citizens, change and adapt, and therefore our climate, we have to at this point. There's no more room for patience. We actually just have to do this now. And so that's why we are really just going for it. And yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to be awesome and share this podcast with your friends. Click subscribe, rate, and review. Do you have a story to tell? An organization you'd like to tell the world about? We love to hear from you and our global community. So please get in touch with us at reVyven.com. That's reVyven.com. Or send us an email at reVyven.com@gmail.com.